Hey guys, welcome along to Sceam Me Up Botty. I'm your host, Rodney Stewart. Right, in this episode we're getting into arguably the best Star Trek movie of all time. In fact, I think you would be hard pressed to find someone that doesn't enjoy this movie. You know, in all honesty, Star Trek 2, The Wrath of Khan, is one of those films that even someone who's not a fan of Star Trek or the Star Trek movies, a complete newcomer could sit down and watch this film and enjoy it. It's just so flippin' good and so entertaining. After the motion picture was released and it wasn't as big a success as they were hoping that it would be, this film was actually suffered from a lower budget than the original. The budget for this movie was only $12 million back in 1982, I want to say. That was simply because of just, I don't want to say the motion picture was bad, but it definitely, compared to later Star Trek, definitely wasn't the best. And it is, even as a fan of the movies and the series, even I find the motion picture hard work at times. It drags on so much. This film doesn't. It takes a moment to get going, but once it starts, it's flippin' fantastic. After the first film was so bad, the series creator Gene Roddenberry was forced out of the sequel's production altogether. I think he's only in there as an associate producer or something. He was very hands-on with the first movie, and the studio just didn't want that for the second one. It was rotten. There's a new word for you. It was directed by Nicholas Meyer, produced by Robert Stalin, screenplay by Jack B. Sorrows, story by Harv Bennett, Jack B. Sorrows, and the final script was finished in just 12 days, I want to say. While doing research here for the script, I went through like 5 different variations of the script before they landed on the final script. And the final script for this movie is actually like 4 or 5 different scripts rolled into one. The best elements of all 3 or 4 whatever came before it, and the writer didn't even take Mayer didn't even take a writing credit for it at the end, and I think that's a bit of a mistake, for this is, as I say, probably the best Star Trek movie in history. Like, for me, it is a close call between this one and Star Trek 3: The Search for Spock. I love both those movies, but this one here may just push that boundary just a little bit further. It was released in North America June 4th, 1982. It was a huge box office success, earning 97 million worldwide. Now that, by today's standards, doesn't sound like much. Like, your average budget for a big action blockbuster would be well above that these days, but considering that there was only a $12 million budget handed out to the movie, and the studios didn't have great faith that it would do any better than the original one, for this to come back, this film got the same reaction that the motion picture did. I think Star Trek would have finished there and then, at least as far as the movies go. But anyway, in the actual movie itself, it's 2285, and Admiral Kirk is overseeing the simulator session of Captain Spock's trainees. Captain Spock is the captain of Enterprise at the beginning of this. In the simulation, Lieutenant Savick commands the Enterprise in a rescue mission to save the crew of the damaged ship Kobayashi Maru. It's the Kobayashi Maru test, and it's a no-win scenario. It's designed basically as for the trainees to fail. It's a test of character more than if they can succeed in a mission. What would they do in the no-win scenario? So, of course, they fail miserably, and Kirk comes on the bridge of the simulator Enterprise, and Saavik questions why it's a fair test. There was no way to get out of it, and he just pretty much explains, it's a no-one situation. It's your character here, blah blah blah. Meanwhile, the Starship Reliant is on a mission for a lifeless planet to test the Genesis device, a technology designed to reorganize dead matter into inhabitable planets. Reliant officers Pavel Chekhov and Captain Terrell beam down onto a planet that they think is Ceti Alpha 6, which is basically almost 100% lifeless except for some spores that they've found. But this Genesis torpedo that their Starfleet is going to introduce as a test on this planet can only be done if it's 100% lifeless, so they have to go down. Chekhov and Terrell make the argument, if it's a life form that can be transplanted from one planet to the other, if we remove it, the planet will be lifeless and we can go ahead with the experiments. But when they get down onto the planet, they're captured by Khan Noonien Singh. Yes, the flippin' class. Years earlier, Kirk exiled Khan and his fellow Superman to Ceti Alpha 5 after they attempted to take over Enterprise. In the original series episode Space Seed, I had to think about that for a second. Space Seed, it was a lot of years after seeing the Wrath of Khan that I actually got a chance to sit down and watch Space Seed. Absolutely flippin' brilliant. And Ricardo Montalban as Khan is absolutely fantastic. He plays it up so well in this movie. And they capture Chekhov and Terrell, and he explains who he is. He introduces himself basically. Chekhov recognizes him as Khan, and Khan falls in Terrell pretty much in the backstory of what happened, and Chekhov is arguing the point that you were a guest on Enterprise and you repaid Captain Kirk's hospitality by trying to take over a ship and kill him. And in Space Seed, you get to see all that at the end of the episode. They're put on trial, and Kirk basically just drops him off on this planet and leaves, and the Wrath of Khan, we found out that he never came back to check on him. And Chekhov is like, on Ceti Alpha 5 you had a decent chance for survival. The planet was alive and thriving, and Khan drops the bombshell that this isn't Ceti Alpha 6, this is Ceti Alpha 5. Ceti Alpha 6 exploded a few months after they were dropped off and knocked Ceti Alpha 5 out of orbit and laid everything to waste, and they've been surviving there ever since. So it's like 15 years since this all happened, and he's just been building up the hatred towards Kirk through the whole thing. So then the crazy wee creature that he takes that's young out and puts him into the ears of Chekhov and Terrell. The way he explains it is they render the victims susceptible to suggestion, so he's going to use these pair as puppets for his plan to capture Kirk. So they capture Reliant, start their plan, learning that the Genesis device can attack Space Station Regular 1, where the device is being developed by Kirk's former lover, Dr. Carol Marcus, and her son, David. And unfortunately for Kirk doesn't know that David's his son. There's a great element to this movie where Kirk is hitting, I don't want to say a midlife crisis because he's a bit older for that, but he's feeling the strain of getting older. And there's a great scene between him and McCoy. McCoy comes to visit him and he gives him a pair of antique glasses, and the reason that he gives them to him is because Kirk, his eyesight is starting to go, and he's allergic to the medication that they use to treat eyes in the 23rd century. So McCoy gives him this set of antique glasses and he says, these are for your eyes, they'll make you see better. And Kirk's apartment where he lives at, it's full of old antiques. He's collecting all this sort of stuff, and McCoy, realising that he's down, he's like, get your command back, get yourself a ship again before you become one of these antiques. So we find out what's happened. The space station's been attacked and Enterprise is dispatched to go check it out. So when he gets to the ship, of course, Spock, being Spock, is like, you know what, you're the most experienced officer in the ship, you're the highest ranked, so I give you Enterprise, give you command of Enterprise. Kirk's kind of like, you don't need to do that sort of thing. So I think he's learned from what happened in the motion picture a little bit. He's maturing a good bit, but Spock is like, the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the one, sort of deal. So Captain Kirk, Admiral Kirk, takes control of Enterprise once more. Off they go. Enterprise is ambushed and crippled by the Reliant. Khan offers to spare Kirk's crew if they relinquish all material related to the Genesis project. Kirk instead stalls for time and remotely lowers Reliant's shields, enabling a computer attack. That's a great little scene in the movie when Kirk's trying to pull off this little stunt to get Reliant to drop her shields, and he's all embarrassed when at one point he has to take the antique glasses out of his pocket and put them on so he can actually see what's happening. That's great. So they manage to attack Reliant. Khan is forced to retreat and get repairs done. While Enterprise limps to Regular 1, Kirk, McCoy and Savick beam to the station and find Terrell and Chekhov alive. Most of the other scientific members of the space station have been slaughtered. They find Carol and David hiding Genesis deep inside a nearby planetoid. Khan, having used Terrell and Chekhov as spies, orders them to kill Kirk over the intercom, which is another flippin' fantastic thing about this movie. And I had watched it for years without even really realising it, until one night I'm sitting watching it and we get to the end of the movie and I'm like, do you know what? Khan and Kirk are never at one point on screen together, like literally physically in the same room together. Never happens throughout the production of this movie. That's really, like, Star Trek being Star Trek, you're just that used to people talking over the communicators or on view screens and whatnot, that it's just second nature watching the show and the movies. And then whenever you think, this guy has been waiting for 15 years to kill Kirk, finally gets his chance, and everything that happens throughout the movie, never once do they actually meet face to face. That's either over intercoms or view screens. Uh, Unreal. When Chekhov and Tyrell are ordered to kill Kirk, they're they're able to fight back against the mind control because they're like, we're Starfleet officers, we can't do this sort of thing. So Tyrell actually ends up turning his phaser on himself at the full kill setting and vaporizes himself. And before the same thing happens, Chekhov, he actually passes out from this little creature in his ear. And luckily for him, when he passes out, it decides to just drop out of his ear and clear way off somewhere. Kirk brings out the phaser, wipes it out, and gets on the intercom. And he's like, "You know what? You've failed. I'm still here. I'm still alive. You're going to have to come down here and get me." And he's like, I've done much better than that. I've hurt you, and I want to continue hurting you. So I'm just going to essentially bugger off and leave you the way you left me, on a dead rock in the middle of a space. And then you get that quote that just everyone knows from Khan. Kirk screaming down the communicator, Khan. And then it cuts to a shot outside in space, and you hear Khan echoing throughout the void. They then, I left a huge gap there, sorry about that, guys. Khan transports the Genesis device onto a ship, and but he's tricked by Kirk and Spock's coded arrangements for a rendezvous. Kirk directs Enterprise and a nearby nebula. Conditions inside the nebula render shields useless, and compromise targeting systems, making Enterprise and Reliant evenly matched. And Spock notes that Khan's tactics indicate inexperience and three-dimensional combat, which Kirk exploits to disable the Reliant. That's a big jump right there. Like, there's a whole sequence within the asteroid where they're showing what the Genesis device is capable of doing. Like, inside this lifeless asteroid, there's like a huge cavern, and there's wildlife, and there's flowers, and there's fruit, and food in abundance. And they're trapped there for a little while. But over the communicators, Spock and Kirk are making things sound a lot worse for Enterprise than what they are. Spock's telling him it's going to take like 2 days for repairs and whatnot, and actual fact, it's 2 hours that they're going to have to wait. So that throws Khan off a little bit. He thinks he's got more time than what he actually has. And Kirk realizes, he gets the bombshell that David is in fact his son. So that's a nice change for Kirk's story in this movie, where at the beginning he's feeling as he's getting old, he's getting close to the end of his career, and he hasn't done anything really cement in his personal life. He's kind of feeling like, once he's gone, that's it, there's going to be no continuation on. But now that he found out that he has a son, he's kind of chilling out a little bit better. So eventually they manage to get beamed off the rock on the Enterprise, and then they have the first real combat situation between Enterprise and Reliant in space. There was also a nephew of Scotty's on Enterprise that was a brand new ensign engineer, and he actually gets killed in one of the combat situations on the Enterprise. And there's a heart-wrenching sequence where Scotty turns up on the bridge of the Enterprise and he's holding his dead nephew in his arms, but it never really goes any further than that. And I was always kind of weirded out by that one. I thought there would be a little bit more involved in that emotional side for Scotty in the movie, but they don't really go any further than that. So they get into the nebula. They're followed by Reliant, and they're on the pretty much a level playing field at this point, because shields don't work, scanners are useless. They're going to have to depend on their wits and just manual aiming and all that sort of stuff. And Reliant actually gets, oh gosh, I'm trying to think, does Reliant get the first shot in this situation? I think it does. But Enterprise shortly after gets a couple good shots with 2 photon torpedoes and a phaser blast that takes out one of the nacelles on the Reliant and blows out its, what I can only describe as the control centers of the ship, really, leaving it pretty much disabled in space. So of course Kirk tells Uhura to signal Reliant to surrender and be boarded, and a mortally wounded Khan on the Reliant activates the Genesis device, which will reorganize all matter in the nebula, including Enterprise. He's like, at the end of the movie, he's, if I'm going out, I'm taking the whole damn lot of yous with me. Though Kirk's crew detects the activation and attempts to move out of range, they'll not be able to escape the nebula in time without the ship's inoperable warp drive. That's been knocked out, of course. Enterprise is taking a huge hammering by the end of the movie. They've only got impulse power to escape on. That's not going to happen. So Spock disappears off the bridge to restore the warp power and the engine room, which is flooded with radiation. McCoy tries to stop him getting in, and there's too much radiation in there, you're not going to survive it. And Spock is just kind of like straight away, and I knew it was far too quick. He's like, perhaps you're right, what's the condition? Mr. Scott, he's out cold on the floor at this point. And as McCoy looks at Scotty, and he's about to tell Spock what happens, out comes the Vulcan neck pinch. Yep, first time we've seen it in the movies. And he knocks McCoy out. He drops to the floor, and he puts his... Now, interestingly enough, and I only discovered this about 5 years ago, when I was doing, I'm pretty much a nerd at the end of the day. That quick Vulcan mind meld before Spock goes to repair the warp drive, that wasn't actually scripted. Leonard Nimoy wasn't huge on the idea of getting into a whole load of Star Trek movies. He only agreed to come back for Star Trek 2 because they promised him that they would give Spock a good emotional death in the movie. But while they were filming this sequence, the director, Nicholas Meyer, said to Nimoy, it's like, you know what, could you do something here at this point, whenever McCoy drops to the floor and you get the gloves, could you do something here that'll kind of leave a back door just in case? So call to action played it through. You can't go in there, there's too much radiation. Spock's like, maybe you're right, what's Mr. Scott's condition? And he does the pinch on McCoy. He drops to the floor, and as Spock lifts the gloves, he puts the hand on McCoy's face and he says, remember. And that was it. That wasn't in the script, that was on the spot as they were doing it, which was an epic bit of genius. I love that part. He goes into the reactor chamber. lifts off the dome of some part of the engine, and there's just this beam of light shooting up onto his face, and he's got the arm on there, and he's like pulling out stuff, and he's doing this, that, and other, and eventually, warp drive. They get the notification on the bridge, warp drive restored. Kirk calls the order, get us out of here. They hit the warp engines as the Genesis device explodes on Reliant, wiping out the nebula, and then Kirk gets the call on the intercom from McCoy. He's like, you need to get down here, be quick. And of course he gets to the engine room. He separated this big pane of glass, and Spock's dying, and they've got their final moment together, where the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the one, sort of a thing. And I always have been and always shall be your friend. And then he does the Vulcan salute on the glass, and Kirk touches his hand, though they're between glass. It's a very, very emotional moment for a Star Trek fan. And then, of course, Spock passes away, and then we get the funeral sequence where they're loading the torpedo tube into the launcher with the Starfleet flag across it, and Spock's body's on there, and they shoot him out into space. And at the end of the movie, we're seeing the new planet that the Genesis device has made, which, for me, watching the movie, was kind of like, that's weird that there wasn't the whole idea of the Genesis device is what they needed, a dead planet for this thing to, rearrange into a life-giving planet, but they only had a nebula. There's no planet there. Where the heck did the Genesis planet come from? But science fiction, groovy. Groovy, that's a word I don't use often, and probably never will again. But at the end of the movie, it's like, Carol, she's, how are you feeling? And Kirk's like, young, I'm feeling young. And that's just like, at the end of the movie, Kirk is, even though he's lost one of his best friends on the face of the planet, he has gained himself a son, and feels that, after he's gone, because of David, there's going to be, the bloodline will continue, sort of a deal. And then we close out the movie, and we have a voiceover from Spock doing the, space, the final frontier. These are the voyages of the Starship Enterprise. Just a beautiful, beautiful way to end off that film. Absolutely, absolutely loved it. Now, I did hear rumours about why William Shatner and Ricardo Montalban were never on screen together, and that's hearsay, really. When Star Trek 2, The Wrath of Khan, was in production, they were also in two different series as well. William Shatner was the star of T.J. Hooker, which is a fantastic police show. If you haven't seen that, you need to go and check it out at some point. Ricardo Montalban was on Fantasy Island, I want to say. I could have the title of that show wrong. I believe it's Fantasy Island. So they were kind of jumping between their shows and coming to film on Star Trek, and people were saying that they just never crossed paths during production of the movie, which is why they're never on set together within the film. It's all over, communicators and view screens and whatnot. But there is, if memory serves, there was a promotional photograph for The Wrath of Khan, and it had the two of them in it, and it was the set within the dead asteroid where the Genesis tests were being done. So who knows? I also did hear rumours that there was a scene between the two of them where they actually fought each other, and it was cut because of just time. But I don't think that that's correct. Like I think, you know, if that had been the case, that may have been put back into the movie as part of the director's cut. The director's cut is far better than the theatrical release. There's not much added in there, but what they have added in there, just it enhances it just ever so slightly. So I like it so much better than the theatrical release. This is definitely, without a doubt, bar Star Trek 3, this has to be the best Star Trek movie that I enjoy. Star Trek The Search for Spock so much. There was chat too of the title of this movie changing quite a bit. I'm not even going to try and attempt to look it up now, but I do believe at one point the film was going to be called Star Trek The Wrath, not the Revenge of Khan, if memory serves. And they fell off that idea because around about the same time, again, this is hearsay, I'm not sure if the dates match up, but of course part 6 of the Star Wars trilogy, Return of the Jedi, at one point was supposed to be called Revenge of the Jedi, and they were knocking about the idea of the Revenge of Khan, and they thought, no, it's going to be too similar to the Revenge of the Jedi, so they changed it to the Wrath of Khan. Now again, that's hearsay, I could be completely wrong on that there, but I do believe I did hear that somewhere along the line. And also, when they were talking about making this film, it was originally called Star Trek The Wrath of Khan. There wasn't the Star Trek 2, well, the Roman numerals, you know. It wasn't called Star Trek 2 because they wanted to, because of how the motion picture performed, they wanted to, and it sounds weird to say it because it's two films with the title Star Trek within the title, so it's obviously a sequel to it, but someone in the higher ups in the studio was like, no Star Trek 2, just called Star Trek The Wrath of Khan. We want to, you know, distance this as far as we can from the original movie. Sounds absolutely ridiculous, but that's producers for you. They're a pain in the arse. But no, eventually they went with Star Trek 2. There was also rumours that because of the performance of the motion picture that Star Trek 2 The Wrath of Khan was going to be released as like a movie of the week sort of a thing, released directly to television, you know, put out like a 2-night special sort of a thing. But I can't see that being true because of the cameras and stuff that was used to make the movie. It's just the way it was shot. Those sorts of cameras wouldn't have been used for a movie that was been produced for television back then, so that's probably something that was very, very early on in the production before the camera started rolling, because if they had have changed that after they had started filming the movie, they would have had to just scrap everything and go back and start over again, just because of the quality of the cameras. So I think it's going to leave it right there. I'm enjoying doing these little reviews here on the shows and the movies and whatnot. We're going to be getting hopefully into 2 episodes a week. I was hoping to have this episode done for Tuesday past, but I've been on holidays for 2 weeks now, and I have just lost track of the days in a major way. Like, I woke up this morning, it was Friday, and I'm kind of like, I thought it was Saturday, and I stuck on the TV to watch something that I normally watch on a Saturday, and there's no sign of it anywhere, and I'm like, where the heck's this at? Oh shit, it's Friday. So my head's up my arse, haven't a clue what day it is, and that's why this episode's out a little late. But having said that there, we're only a few episodes into this series, so it doesn't matter whether it's on time or late or not, because we've got no set schedule right now. But we are going to be trying to aim for at least a Tuesday and a Friday release on the show here. So if you're interested in Star Trek and science fiction in general, this isn't just going to be a Star Trek episode. I'm here for the long game. 10 years down the line, I still intend to be putting out episodes of this show. So we'll just have to see how it goes. So guys, hope you enjoyed it, and I will talk to you in the next episode. This has been a production of Coins Edge Media. Check out my social media links in the show notes. Thank you so much for listening.